some notes. I have some notes here. And it's all of the weird, cringe, strange things that I did or we did at a private Christian school growing up that is probably different from public schools. I went to a private Christian school from 3rd grade to 12th grade, and, until graduating. And the school was actually preschool through 12th grade. So in 3rd grade, I actually kind of felt like a late comer because many of the kids had been there since at least kindergarten. And even when we graduated, I would say like half the class was originally from kindergarten all the way through. I feel pretty confident, at least 40%. Let's start off when we were younger. In elementary school, when we learned about the middle finger, flicking people off, we kind of understood, that was a bad thing to do. You shouldn't do that. And, meant something we couldn't put to words, right? As young elementary school kids that are extremely sheltered. So, but we knew it was bad, and it meant, like, basically go to hell. And, or like, maybe I hate you or something. So, I remember that, of course, we could not give the middle finger to anybody, but we could do it to the ground. So, and this wasn't like told to us by teachers or anything, but it was like a known thing with the kids that we could give the middle finger to the ground because that was giving it to Satan, to hell. Okay? And so I remember like walking around sometimes, or just, I don't know, being funny, and kids would like be putting it down to the ground. Another one is we would sometimes call people Tabitha as an insult. This could be a serious insult, or it could be said jokingly. And the reason Tabitha was an insult is because in the Bible there is a character, a person named Tabitha, and in the Bible, when you're reading about Tabitha, it says also called Dorcas. So we had a Bible class every single year in school, and in one of the Bible classes, maybe 3rd or 4th grade, when we read about Tabitha, we said, oh, that means Dorcas. So then we would call people Tabitha because it meant like, okay, Tabitha, okay, dork, or you're Tabitha, you're a dork, you're a Dorcas. The F word, of course, was not something that was said, and I actually really don't remember people saying the F word until maybe senior year. I certainly didn't say it, and people weren't saying it in class, or in school. Maybe they were saying it outside of school, certain groups of kids, but my friends didn't use it, and I don't know, like the actual F word, right? But there were variations or levels of F words. So that's when we started saying things like freak. Not like you freak, but like what the freak instead of what the or freaking, like are you freaking kidding me instead of the actual word, right? And then as we got older, some people started saying frick, and they would say fricking, or oh, you know what, I even forgot, there was also freaking with G's, right? Friggin, friggin. So those ones, freaking and frigging, that was a level up. Like, I remember being like, I don't know if I should be saying that because it's a little too close to the other one. I don't know, that one was just like a different level. And by the way, my cat, I can't, she's always here and she's so noisy, so she is over there snoring. Sorry about that. Okay, another one to do with like swearing and things. OMG was very popular. OMG, like this is the time period that OMG was created, right? Because we just started texting, having things like AIM, Instant Messenger, and people were doing all the shortening of things. So OMG was very common, and it of course meant oh my, G-O-D. And as a Christian school, we were taught you never take the Lord's name in vain. So we are not saying the full thing, and we didn't even usually say oh my gosh, because gosh was a little bit too close for comfort to G-O-D. So we didn't use OMG. We used OMW because, well, by the way, which is confusing for some people because everyone else in the world used OMW as on my way. Our OMW was oh my word. That's what we said then, oh my word. So in texts and instant messenger, we're saying OMW. You wouldn't believe what happened to me today, right? Oh my word. And that was something that everybody used. So funny. So we had dress code, which I think is kind of a normal thing that schools have some sort of dress code, but ours was maybe a little bit more strict. We didn't have uniforms like many other private schools did, so we could wear whatever we wanted, but you did have to follow dress code. And dress code was things like you couldn't have sleeveless shirts, no spaghetti straps, no what do we call these? No halter tops, no why can't I think of when you don't have straps? I can't think of what that's called right now. But anyways, couldn't wear anything. You had to have like full coverage on the shoulders, and couldn't also low-rise jeans were very popular. So with low-rise jeans, if they were too low and your shirt wasn't long enough, yeah, the girls were having to go find some sweatpants or whatever to put on in the lost and found bin. I never had to go to the lost and found bin, but I remember when people did, and it was always like, the walk of shame when they had to find whatever and put it on. I always thought that was really funny though. And I remember my friend, she had ripped jeans, but she put tights underneath them so her skin wasn't showing, but she still got in trouble for that. So nothing too crazy with dress code, but and of course you couldn't have colored hair, which is such a common thing today, but you couldn't have any non-natural type color hair, like green, blue, purple, that type of stuff. Okay, here's a crazy one. We had this teacher that she was a Bible teacher. I think she also taught English. I had her for Bible, but I didn't have her for English. If she even taught that, I think that was her other thing. Anyways, she had this theory, let's call it, that you could kiss before you could hug when you're dating a boy. Her reasoning for this was that you could kiss like a peck, and really the way that this would happen is if, you imagine people like holding their hands behind them, when you see like cute little pictures of people, like little kids kissing or whatever, holding their hands behind and like going, that's like the only way that this theory works anyways. But her theory was you could kiss like on the lips like that, but a hug was much more intimate because your bodies were getting close, and then I don't know, I would cause guys to be lustful, and it just was too intimate and too close, like touching bodies on each other. And I remember thinking, like, this is so crazy. None of us went with that. It's funny too because everybody was hugging everybody, as friends, and she was not about that. Like, I think she would see hugging and then she would share this theory. But yeah, so there were a lot of people that were very strict about things. One time in the hallway during passing time, I was in a circle talking to this guy that I dated or was dating, Steven, and some of his friends, and Steven had said something like, I am screwed, or screw you, or something to do with screwing, right? And a teacher was in her room and heard him, and remember, this is during passing time, and heard him, and she said, Steven, could you come into my room, please? And we're all like, oh my gosh, why is she asking him to come in the room? And then he came back out, and we're like, what happened? What was that all about? And he said that she asked him, Steven, do you know what screwing means? Or do you know what screw you means? Or whatever. And just so awkward. so there were always parents and teachers present. But the after party was sponsored by this kid and his family, and they had a really big house and garage. So after the banquet was done, we were all invited to go over there, and we went there. And what were we doing? We were doing crafts in his garage, which is great. I love crafts. I'm all about a good craft. It's just not exactly how you envisioned your prom to be, but that's how it was. My class actually fought quite a bit to get a dance as the after party, and a girl in my class, her parents had this empty warehouse, or knew somebody with an empty warehouse or something, but they convinced the school board to let us have a dance after. So we had banquet and everything as normal, and then the after party was this dance in this warehouse. There were still teachers and parents there, making sure there was room for the Holy Spirit while you're dancing, but it still was so fun, so much fun. I am really glad that we had that. We were the first class that in the school's history that ever got to have some sort of dance. And then after we graduated, the grade below us, when they were seniors, they were then the first ones to make it like an official prom. So now I think the school has like an official prom, which is cool for them. I wish we had an official prom, but still, I'm glad we got to have that dance, and it felt so epic, especially since the school had never had any type of dancing whatsoever. So that was exciting. Another thing that is different from most public schools is we did not have a football team. It was a small school. Our class was the biggest class in the school's history up until that time, and I think I graduated with like 58 people or something like that. So it was a small school. We didn't have any type of big sports like that, but basketball was our homecoming, so we still got to have where you'd have a spirit week where each day you're dressing up as a different theme, and then the big basketball game was homecoming. No type of dance. Again, there was zero dancing, but it was just like a big exciting game that everybody would go to, kind of as like the social thing of the night. You know, nothing happened after. There was no like after homecoming parties or whatever, but that was our homecoming. Obviously, at a private Christian school like this, where we're very sheltered, the parents are very strict. Some are not, but it's more common than not that parents are very strict. And even so, much as I remember being at sleepovers, and there was this one girl who her parents would not allow her to watch PG movies without them or without their approval. And I remember being in like 6th grade and watching, like getting ready to watch a PG movie at a sleepover, and this girl looked at the back, and she would be like, actually I went to several sleepovers that she was at, and she was always really good about this. If we watched a movie, she would look at the back and be like, oh, it's PG, that's okay, like I'm just gonna go into a different room, and she would bring a book to read, which is so sad. Oh my gosh, I always felt bad about that. I was like, we don't have to watch this movie. but she would just be like, no, it's fine, like, I want to read my book. And, but a PG movie, there's like nothing that bad in a PG movie. My parents let me watch PG-13 movies all the time. Like, my favorite show was Friends as a kid, and my parents would just have talks with me of like, hey, you know, these certain things aren't good, and that was that. But they always let me watch PG-13 movies, and I just thought it was crazy this girl couldn't watch PG movies. I like didn't even know what a G movie was. But she was a good kid. She always was listening to her parents. But there were always different parents that had different beliefs about things, which I'm sure is everywhere, anywhere, any school. But you guys, I'm sorry about the neighbor's dog. The neighbor's dog is like one of those hound dogs, and its bark is so loud. So I apologize if you can hear that. But anyways, so even though we went to this Christian school, there were all these different levels of how strict people were about certain things and beliefs around religious stuff. So one thing is everything was broken down into secular meaning of the world, non-Christian, and then Christian and non-secular, or sorry, secular and non-Christian. No, okay, let me slow down. Secular and Christian. Secular being non-Christian, Christian being non-secular. Okay, there we go. So, if you could find even a sliver of an artist, an author, a company, whatever, that said something about God or being a Christian, it was like, bingo, they're a Christian. Okay, it's a Christian band, it's a Christian book, it's a Christian brand. And then people were all like gung-ho about that. If you couldn't find anything about them talking about God or Christianity, then it was labeled secular. Okay, by the way, I'm just like explaining all this. I'll tell you like my whole thoughts on the end, but I always thought that this was like kind of crazy. But anyways, so secular was basically when you said something was secular, that was bad. So let's say, I started to listen to the radio of regular music. That would be secular music. And, people would be like, oh yeah, I'm not listening to secular music. Like, I only listen to Christian music. And there was a bookstore that was by our house that my mom could go in and look at the books for like an hour plus. And they had this section in the back that was 3 or 5 computers with headphones that you could put on, and it was all of the music in their library, like all of the music that you could purchase from them, the CDs that they carried, which meant this was a Christian bookstore. So if this bookstore carried them, they were Christian somehow. And I remember I would try to find the coolest, most non-Christian sounding music that I could from there, which I found a good amount. But, like, for one, POD silly things. But so, like books do, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, good, because their authors were known to talk about religion and God and things. Harry Potter, not good, because J.K. Rowling didn't talk about being a Christian. So then the people would say that is not good. So there were a lot of teachers, a lot of parents that did not allow their kids to watch or read Harry Potter. My parents didn't care. My parents didn't really care about that stuff. So I loved Harry Potter, thankfully. But there would be like some kids that would find out that I watched Harry Potter, read it, and they'd be like, "What? You know that's bad, right?" Like, it's fine. So there, also holidays like Halloween. Halloween was a secular holiday, and I came from a public school where you would usually dress up for Halloween. And I remember the first year I came to Halloween and I had kind of dressed up, and then realizing this was not the place because people believed that Halloween was of the devil. So I didn't really wear any costumes to school after that, and it was always a mixture. There were the people that thought it was fine, whatever, but then there were definitely those people that literally said it was of the devil and you should not be celebrating it. A couple other things that are a little bit different is we would say the pledge every morning to the flag, but then we also would say pledge to the Bible every day. And we would also, in Bible class, we would also say, gosh, I can't even think of what it is, but you put your pinky up and say it. I can't think of what it is, but yeah, so we would do that, and then we would also pray in just about every single class. And in high school, we had 8 hours. So think about it. That's a lot of praying. And you would think that I would get used to praying out loud since I went there since 3rd grade. But I actually was raised in the Lutheran church, which is very more traditional, and a lot of the prayers out loud are usually written for you, and when you're praying it's like in your head, and I don't know, I'm just like more reserved, and I never felt that comfortable praying out loud. It felt like, it just felt more like performative in that way. You had to, I always felt like you had to say the right words, and if you didn't, it would be weird. Like, I remember one time I was praying and I don't remember what I said, but I remember people laughing because just the way that I said it wasn't right, and I just hated that. So I never ever volunteered to pray, and I would only pray when I was asked to, which would happen sometimes, where a teacher would pick you and say, "Hey, would you pray?" And then I would, but I pretty much never volunteered to pray. And teachers would say that, "Does anybody volunteer to pray for the class today?" And there was always because it was a private Christian school, and they had Wednesday, or actually no, they had chapel. Did they have chapel every day? I don't know, it was a lot. Anyways, you had to go a certain number of times, and I was so tired because I had these 7:30 a.m. classes, and I'm not a morning person, so I used chapel time a lot to go and take a nap before my next class. And at the end of the year, I actually had to pay money because I didn't hit my chapel quota. So I always thought that was kind of stupid. But anyways, I'm so grateful for the school. Like, a lot of people have negative feelings towards the school for being so sheltered and judgmental at times. Of course, in that environment it can be really judgmental, and I totally, like, yes, I don't like any of that, but I can see the good in it because it was pretty sheltered, which can be a negative thing, but it also can be a positive thing. The kids that I knew were great kids. Not that many people were getting in trouble. We would all kind of look out for each other. I didn't think there was any type of bullying going on, like you always hear about. There was like no bullying, and I actually wanted to go to a public school because, you know, the public schools in my area had like 500-600 plus kids in their grade, and I always thought that would be just so amazing to have so many people to meet. And I was a very confident kid, so I always felt like it would be cool to go because I would love to be a friend to everybody and, you know, be there for the people that were bullying or you know, being bullied, so that I could stick up for them. But yeah, like, there were definitely different cliques or groups, let's call them, of friends, but that is going to happen anywhere. You know, there's the people that are in sports, there's the people that are in theater, there's, you know, when you have different interests and stuff, you have different groups of friends. But still, I feel like we were all pretty decent kids, and I'm really grateful for the supportive parents of the kids and the supportive staff at the school. Like, the teachers were really supportive. I went to so many teachers' houses, and, you know, we were really involved with them. Like, they cared about us, and that was real. You know, it was really important to me after all of that to figure out how I wanted to show up in my faith and what I wanted that to look like. And the biggest thing that I take away from that experience at my school is that I do not want to be judgmental at all, and I also don't want to be so I'm trying to think of what the word is, but like that whole categorizing of like secular or Christian, I don't want to do that. I just want to like live an experience and let people live an experience and decide what's going to be best for them, decide what's going to be best for me, and just love people. And I always hope that my faith is going to show through my actions, and very seldom do I talk about my faith, and that is intentional because growing up in that environment, the school and feel like I had a normal upbringing as far as the school goes. Like, I wasn't that sheltered, but, and I also didn't go to like a very rich private school. We would kind of call ourselves like the poor private school. The kids that went there, even though my mom, when we went to the school, when we transferred, she was nervous that I was going to be like the poor kid, and she thought everyone was going to be like super rich kids, and they really weren't. I don't think I would have noticed anyways, but I never felt like the poor kid. And the people that went there, it was a more affordable private school, so they didn't have a lot of money, and we had a lot of students that were kids of teachers, and if you were a teacher there, your kid got to go for free, I think. So we had a lot of those kids too. There were a few kids that their parents had decent businesses and were more well off, but certainly not the norm. Alright, now that it is like